Recently, I watched one of my favorite movies ever, Back to the Future, and I gotta say, I have not remembered how truly weird that movie is. So for those who haven't seen it, I'm gonna catch you up. Back to the Future is about this guy named Marty McFly, who's a 17-year-old in his 30s. He goes to high school, and his best friend is a disgraced nuclear scientist. Together, they create a time machine, and then they use the time machine to, and get this is the catcher, Marty uses the time machine to try fuck his mom. If you clicked on this video and you saw the title, I'm sure you already know what it's about. And I'm sure you have a lot of questions now, like, why am I in bed? And why am I talking about Back to the Future? Well, because I think that Back to the Future is a perfect metaphor for America's infrastructure. What I'm trying to say here is that America has the ability to have the best infrastructure in the world, but it would rather just try f*** its mom. I may have gotten a little bit lost in this metaphor. Welcome to Armchair Politics. On this episode, we're going to talk about how American infrastructure has completely failed us, and what can be done about it. And where we're going, we don't need roads. Okay, but we actually really do need roads. That's kind of what this whole episode is about. We're going to start this journey by going back to the present. It's no secret that American infrastructure isn't that great. In fact, the White House itself only puts it at number 13 in the world. The White House gets this number from a 2019 report by the World Economic Forum. But this number isn't that great. Not because it's very bad, but because it's actually very optimistic. Anyway, this entire score is determined by polling business leaders of various countries. And my statistical analysis enthusiasts may notice a problem with this already. This poll suffers from something called statistical bias. Since they're only polling the wealthy business leaders of countries, the wealthy business leaders of countries only tend to see the best of the best in terms of infrastructure. So it's not really an accurate poll for how good American infrastructure actually is on a day-to-day basis. Similar to how Doc and Marty couldn't find weapons-grade plutonium at 7-Eleven, I couldn't find a good rating on the World Economic Forum. So I decided to go somewhere else. The American Society of Civil Engineers. ASCII rates the United States infrastructure at a whopping, drum roll please. Liam, please drum roll. That was a good one. C-, which is barely a passing grade. But in this metaphor, I guess the teacher is God? Yeah, we'll go with that. We are never going to get this done. All right, it's cool. Anyway, according to ASCII, there is a water main break every 2 minutes, and 43% of our roads are in bad condition. And there's also a lot of lead in our air, which might explain a lot. It's not just roads and water. Infrastructure is a very big umbrella. American schools received a rating of D+, which is not surprising because the average American has a literacy rate of a 7th grader. Our water supply received a C+, which is also not surprising because, according to my paper here, there's a lot of lead in it. Oh my god. Wait 1 second. That's where I live. So anyway, I have some apologies to make to the many filtered water drinkers that I've made fun of over my life. So yeah, that's awkward. So I've moved in a location very far away from the lead-infested water that I've been drinking for a very long time. The filtered water drinkers truly have won against me. At this point, we know that American infrastructure isn't in a great place. Every single American president in modern history has promised some huge overlapping infrastructure bill, which makes sense because as an American, you don't need statistics to know the infrastructure is terrible. You can walk outside your door and you'll find a bunch of potholes in your street. Then if you walk down that street, you'll find a 6-lane main road with the safety record of a Saudi Arabian construction site, and also, to be honest, an American construction site too. So at this point, I'm sure you're saying, Armchair Politics, can you just chill? I mean, I get that it's bad, but why does infrastructure matter? And how does Back to the Future relate to this video topic at all? To answer your first question, no! I can't chill. It's not in my skill set. And to answer your second question, American infrastructure does matter. All infrastructure matters. Infrastructure is one of the most important things a government does. And it may seem like a pretty dumb statement to say that infrastructure matters, but if you're currently in Congress, that seems to be something that's being debated, which is pretty stupid. So in order to prove my point, we're going to go back to the past, or Back to the Future. It doesn't really matter. The naming convention of this movie makes no f***ing sense. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning into Armchair Politics. I have a doozy of a story for you tonight. Let's take a trip back to the 1800s, where DeLoreans and cars were but a dream. and America was almost done manifesting its destiny. The cities were bursting at the seams with folks looking to make a name for themselves. And speaking of making, they were building like crazy. The construction of the largest railroad in the world was almost finished, stretching from East Coast to West Coast. Let me tell you, it was hotter than a June bug on a tin roof. Oh no, the Civil War struck. You see, it was a politically divisive time where some states wanted the right to enslave people, and other states thought it wasn't the cat's pajamas. Don't fear, dear listener. Northern states won due to much more robust infrastructure. Fast forward a bit to the 1920s, and America was building like a house of fire. The rail system was expanding faster than a jackrabbit on a hot day. If you took a trip out east, you'd see the largest subway system in the world nearing completion. It had almost 500 stations and 660 miles of track. It was a sight to behold, let me tell you. But as fate would have it, a mighty challenge came a-knocking. It was the biggest, baddest economic crash the world had ever seen. They called it the Great Depression. And let me tell you, it was sadder than a one-legged puppy. The country came to a real pang-wangle. Infrastructure construction came to a screeching halt and all seemed lost. But wait, my dear listeners. The federal government wasn't one to back down from a challenge. They came up with a new deal.
You and you and you and you've got a president now. He gave the land a new deal. You hold the cards, now you deal. You and you and you and you put shoulders to the plow. He gave us what we asked for, now pay him back somehow.
Which established some small potatoes like Social Security and Medicare. But the real kicker was the Public Works Administration, which was responsible for building all sorts of things. They built the Hoover Dam, the largest concrete structure in the world at the time, and it went up quicker than a greased pig in a mudslide. They also built 34,000 buildings, bridges, and homes that we still use today. Now, some folks accused the New Deal of being too communist, and said the excessive spending would lead to rampant inflation. On that note, this episode is sponsored by American Tobacco. 9 in 10 doctors say it'll cure your asthma. Next up, is cancer a scourge on American health, or is it a progressive hoax? To answer that question, we're joined by this doctor and the CEO of Camel Cigarettes. Man, that was a lot of really fast talking. They also repaired this whole bear den complex in Franklin Zoo. I know it's not as exciting as a century-old dam, but I gotta keep you engaged by changing scenes with the magic of editing. Magic of editing. Anyway, the New Deal and its infrastructure programs are directly responsible for lifting the United States out of the Great Depression. Fun fact, this one rail tunnel in New York is responsible for 20% of the United States GDP on a yearly basis, which is crazy. Without immediate and extensive action on infrastructure repair, the United States will see a $10.3 trillion decline in its GDP. By 2029, U.S. households will lose $3,280 a year in disposable income. The failure of dams, bridges, and as we've seen very recently, trains will lead to a direct loss of human life. So if infrastructure is so important, why did we stop building it and why did we stop maintaining it? Well, there's two main reasons. There's a problem with how we fund infrastructure and there's a problem with how we actually build the infrastructure. And to cover those two problems, we're going to have to make like a tree and get out of here. And arrive in the early 1980s, baby. America was expanding into the suburbs. The writers of Back to the Future were answering the question, what if we never said no to any idea ever? And Ronald Reagan was elected president. I can't imagine anything going wrong here. Ronald Reagan is like the New York Yankees of American history. He sucks. And if you don't know who Ronald Reagan is, well, he is a TV star with a large record of sexual encounters with a questionable amount of consent involved. Reagan's whole thing was Reaganomics and a whole lot of racism. Basically, what he said he wanted to do was reduce government spending and completely remove welfare. And he only pretty much succeeded at one of those. But he did successfully get rid of most of America's welfare, so yeah. Also, for some extra credit, he created the student debt crisis that we know and love today. Ronald Reagan didn't only make the healthcare system that we know and love today, he also fundamentally changed the way that we build and finance infrastructure. Should I jump for the transition? Alright, cool. Ronald Reagan pioneered the use of public-private partnerships. What would happen before is the government would hire the workers, gather the materials, then complete the project. But now, the government would hire a company that would hire the workers, hire a company that would gather the materials, hire a company that would design the project, then hire a whole nother company that would actually build the project. It was argued that doing infrastructure projects with a private-public partnership would make the whole thing more efficient. Because famously, hiring private companies always makes things more efficient. But big surprise, they actually don't. Since at every single level, every company has to make a profit, it adds a bunch of completely pointless overhead costs. Since, over time, contracting companies developed entire monopolies over their area, the government's kind of forced to pay the prices, because what other option do they have? Building the infrastructure is only half the journey. It also has to be maintained. And as you can guess, This also added a bunch of overhead costs because the company maintaining the infrastructure also had to make a profit. I'm starting to see a bit of a pattern here. This whole private-public model has led to both ballooning costs and timelines, because the private company in question actually has no motivation to get the project done in time. Their primary motivation is about the profit they make. So actually they're incentivized to take longer because the government will just keep the money tap open. Man, I really feel like I'm forgetting something here. Oh yeah, deregulating private companies has brought us hits like Luckily, there actually has been a lot of momentum to address some of America's infrastructure woes. It seems like forever ago, but the Biden administration did push a $3 trillion infrastructure bill that later turned into a $1.5 trillion bill, then later turned into a $1 trillion bill. But it was a start. And no one would ever oppose a bill that was written as a compromise from the start to improve something as important as infrastructure, right? Yeah, no, people opposed it. Specifically Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. Joe Manchin, for one, is a literal coal baron, and Kyrsten Sinema just seems really easy to bribe. They literally high-fived at the prospect of blocking legislation at the World Economic Forum. There are a lot of things I want to say right now that I can't say because anything you put on the internet is forever. Anyway, the things they fought to remove from the bill include a cap on insulin prices, funding for senior care, funding for schools, and anything climate change related. Some people call it evil and immoral to have people pay half their income to survive on the most basic level, but here in America, we call it freedom. Despite being a band-aid solution, the infrastructure bill was a hashtag pretty good thing, but it doesn't fundamentally solve the problem. Unless we fundamentally change how we fund and build infrastructure, it doesn't matter how much money we throw at private companies. The underlying problem is never going to get fixed. So we need to do two things to get America back on track, absolutely pun intended. We need to stop relying on the corner-cutting, profit-taking corporations, and once we build infrastructure, we can't stop building. If we do one infrastructure boom, then just stop, all the knowledge that the workers gained will be lost, and then we'll be where we are today. Basically what I'm saying is that America has a lot of money and power, and that the American people deserve high-quality, reliable infrastructure. But instead, the American government chooses to use its money and power to f*** its mom. Its mom being the infrastructure. To be honest, that's the only loose connection I made here. That was just the hook to get you watching. At this point, I'm sure you're wondering what you can do about it, and of course I have something for you can do about it. You can try to learn more about the topic. I left links in the description to further your learning about infrastructure. And if you want to learn more about left-wing politics in general, you can go to the DSA's website. They have a bunch of great resources that are easy to understand. The other thing you can do is vote. I know that voting does seem kind of useless, especially in today's climate, but voting is still important, especially in local elections. Anywho, I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you liked it, please give me a like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Tune in every few weeks for similar content. I'll post as much as I can. Anyway, have a fantastic day.